All right. So, welcome everyone. My name's Craig Baldwin, partner at Upsource, and we are here on a interesting creative outcomes podcast with co-director and worker owner Farra Trompeter from Big Duck. And Big Duck has been with Upsource for probably about a year, but has been in business for over 30 years. Is that right, Farah?
That is correct.
Okay. And I know that you've been with the organization for a while. So before we get into a bunch of questions about Big Duck, about the industry, about your services and what you're seeing, tell me about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It is a pleasure. I think we will be approaching our year anniversary this fall, and we've been enjoying working with you and your team. So I'm Farah. I am joining you from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up here in New York, but I've also lived in DC and San Francisco. In my professional career, which is also around 30 years, I've always worked with nonprofits, either in house on nonprofit teams as a staff member or at a consulting firm whose clients were all nonprofits, as is the case with Big Duck. And I've been at Big Duck since 2007, so 18 years. And the company, though, as you mentioned, was started in 1994. It was started by Sarah Durham, who we'll talk about as we go in our conversation. And today at Big Duck, we really focus on how we can help organizations to use communications to build relationships with the people who they need to have relationships with to achieve their mission. And we do that primarily through building strong brands, developing compelling campaigns, creating plans that really help guide their efforts, and providing really helpful trainings and workshops to build the capacity of their teams and of the entire sector as best we can. So what was exciting for me when I joined Big Duck back 18 years ago, one of the things that really drew me to Big Duck and has helped me continue to be here and stay here is that the company really does focus that kind of intersection between communications and fundraising, which was my background, and really is about helping organizations get to that next level, not just do transactional one-off projects, but really, even in everything that we do, try to build the capacity of the staff we're working with. And again, I got my start in fundraising. I was doing a lot of direct response fundraising. So raising money by the phone, telemarketing, everyone's favorite form of fundraising to be solicited by, almost as much as being stopped on the street. And then got into direct mail and eventually online fundraising and online engagement. And through that, started getting to broader communications and branding. So when I met Sarah and found Big Duck, I was really at a place where I had been moving into communications more and more, and was really excited to work for an organization that was communications first, but also did fundraising related work.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks for that intro. I have to ask, and this wasn't really a part of the questions I sent you before, but a little bit of, and I don't mean this in a political way at all, but given the types of clients that Big Duck services, um, what is the market like right now? It seems like I don't know if it would be too far to say it's under attack, but there's just pressure. There seems to be pressure, and there's pressure in many industries, to be fair, right now, whether that's AI related or something else. But what are you seeing? How is Big Duck adapting to potential challenges in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think because we work with the nonprofit sector, I do think it's safe to say that it is under attack. I think we're seeing either existing or potential legislation that is, and actions that is really trying to, cut off funding, close down. I have two clients I know of in the past, two former clients of ours uh, that in the past month have closed operations. Not, because they had lost funding and their issue areas particularly under attack in the justice space. But we also see organizations worried about losing their 501c3 status. So it is a very tense time for the groups that we're working with, which feels very different than anything I have seen before in my career. And it's unclear how much is distraction and how much is going to be permanent. Um, but because of that distraction, it's causing organizations to have to focus and kind of operate out of a place of protection. And with that means that we're seeing organizations have less budget to do things, as well, and need them done faster. So we always talk in the consulting world that fast, cheap, good. You can't have all three. Well, everybody wants all three, even more and more these days. I feel like so we're having to negotiate around what we can do in that dynamic while preserving what makes our process and our work unique, which is that our team is very thoughtful and intentional and collaborative. So you're not just getting a writer. If you need copy work done, you're getting a strategist who's thinking about your audiences and your goals and bringing research. You're getting a designer who's also thinking about how those words interplay with visual communications if we're doing branding or campaigns. You're getting an account manager that's not only managing our team, but also helping think about your own culture and stakeholder engagement. So it's an expensive process because of that. And so we're having to figure out how can we either modify our process to still get good outcomes, but do things in a way that is responsive. And we're also having to turn things away where it's unrealistic for us to say that we can get good results. Again, one of the things that I'm proud of is that generally the things that we create last, and they aren't things that are changed 6 months later, given the kind of work that we do. So I don't know, we're still navigating this moment just like everybody else, and every day brings a new challenge and a new opportunity. But I would say it's definitely stressful and straining. And I think also, I know I've listened to some of your podcasts around business development, and we can talk about the RFP process. I know there have been firms for many years who say, we'll never respond to an RFP. We've never had that position because in the nonprofit sector, there are often requirements given the budget of an organization to get 3 bids and have multiple, to use an RFP to make sure you're going through an equitable process. But we are selective about which RFPs we respond to, given how well we think we're a fit for it, our access to decision makers or conversations with people, the budgets, the criteria that's being looked at. So we're just having to be even more selective or have even more candid conversations with organizations to figure things out. So I would just say it's a nonprofit sector is very much under attack. We're trying to support in a lot of different ways in response to that, and navigate through it.
Well, I applaud you for your attitude and your mindset, right? Because we work with many, many clients, even in our little world, who are also in the nonprofit sector, who are facing similar challenges. And sometimes they just wave the white flag and they're like, we don't know what to do, right? And so you're obviously, especially given your experience and how long Big Duck has been around, what you said earlier, yes, there are challenges, but there's also opportunity. And so I applaud you for approaching it that way, because I know how stressful it is probably day to day and when you go to bed at night. But what's the alternative, right? I don't think many of us have an alternative. We have to find some type of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think one of the things, particularly working in communications, so I know you work with lots of different creative services firms, probably some that are focused primarily on maybe digital and web or some other things. What's hard about the space of communications, and I'm not sure if all of your agencies are communications in one way or another. Are they? Is that true?
No, many of them are kind of more focused on brand or more focused on web, but we do have, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 who are pure play communications, PR, that type of thing, and very industry specific.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like PR, I think is having a whole other experience in this moment, right? Big Duck doesn't do PR. We don't do crisis communications. We're not ghostwriting and managing someone's social accounts. That's a whole other world that is also dealing with a lot of stress right now. But I think what we've seen, when there are recessions, when there are times of economic or political uncertainty, often organizations will pull back communications. It's basically one of the first budgets, if not the first budget, to get cut. Because again, you got to keep the lights on, you got to keep the programs operating. But we've seen time and time again when organizations cut back on communications, they are going quieter and they will lose the mind share, which is a concept that Sarah Durham, our founder, talked a lot about in a book called Nonprofit Communications Engine, right? People, as we know, people will only remember you if they hear you time and time again. I hear a lot of organizations also talking about a surround sound approach to their communications. And if you cut back on your communications, you stop sending out your updates, you stop your website is talking about work you did 3 years ago. When you go to the what's new area, all of that can now create a negative, you're going anywhere from people forgetting you to people having a negative association with you. So it can be hard when you're facing a decision on how to manage a budget. But I always caution against cutting communications, because that is the thing that will keep you going. So I find that confounding, that is still often the solution organizations select.
Mm. Well, that was a pretty good pitch, I think, to keep the communications flowing, especially for organizations. Yeah, yeah, because that it is. I imagine, as someone who donates to nonprofits and engages with them myself, and it even serves some time on them. The communications does seem to be the lifeblood. Every time they reach out, I respond, right? Whether that's with a donation, or yes, I'll go to this thing, or yes, I'll buy tickets to this show. It's when they're not communicating to me that I kind of forget about them.
Exactly. You move on to the next person who communicates with you. And I think the other thing, sorry, you opened up a soapbox for me, whether you realize it or not, Craig. Um, the other thing that I think often happens, especially I would say within purpose driven nonprofit organizations that we know best, but I'm sure happens in all organizations, is communications doesn't always have a seat at the table. They're not always sitting on the leadership team. They're not always in conversations about organizational strategic decisions, but yet they're asked to be the first line of response when the organization makes a misstep or does something. And I think when you have communications in the beginning, having a seat at the table, a voice on that leadership team and whatever structure it is, or around the table when you're making strategic decisions, they can think through implications. And people who work in communications solve problems and think about audience in a different way than other roles. And that's my other pitch for anyone out there listening, is making sure you have your communications person involved in decisions. At Big Duck, I'm co-director. I help run our company, but I also manage our marketing and business development. I work closely with our account management team to support client experience. I work with the team as an advisor if they need anything, and I directly lead some of our work either as a strategist or a trainer. So we're a small company. I happen to, wear lots of
Sounds like a
hats,
Swiss
as they
Army knife.
say.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Whatever the sort of warm, fuzzy version of a Swiss Army knife is, because if you ever met me, I'm a lover, not a fighter. But I think I think about marketing all the time, and I'm on the leadership team, but that's not always the case.
Right, right. So I'm gonna go a slightly different direction, but you talked about Sarah Durham, the longevity of the organization, now 30 plus years. But one thing that I found to be very interesting, even when we first met, is that Big Duck has, for lack of a better term, I guess it truly is a co-op model, or a co-op with regard to ownership and how it's managed or how it's run. Um, would you be able to kind of just break that down and explain that to the audience in terms of what is that model? What does it entail? Perhaps how is it different from, we hear about ESOPs quite a bit. Um, and then why that was pursued now, 4 years ago, I think you said earlier. Just give me a sense of
Take
what
you on
that
the
decision
journey.
was like. Yeah, please.
Sure. So Sarah started Big Duck in 1994, and for our first 27 years, she was the CEO, the principal, the founder, the sole owner. And she did build a leadership team around her, especially in the sort of second half of that time period. And in 2019, she made myself and Elizabeth Ricca, who's no longer working at Big Duck, but she made Liz and I partners. And that was the first step toward, bringing us a little bit at a higher level in decision making with a small amount of profit. Then COVID happened, and that was obviously shook up everybody on multiple ways. And it became a time of reflection for Big Duck overall, and particularly for Sarah. And she had actually, and she wrote about this in blogs, and has spoken about it as well. In 2011, so sorry, going back even further, Big Duck moved into an office space in Brooklyn, and we had a 10-year lease. And when we signed that lease in 2011, Sarah knew that in 2021, she didn't know about COVID, but she did know at that point she would have just, turned 50. and that was going to be a major sort of chapter in her own life and thinking about what comes next. So then she always kind of knew that might be a big time of reflection for her. Maybe she was going to pivot her role, maybe she'd go part-time, but that was always a question. And so as COVID happened, and she really thought about what she wanted to do. At the time, she owned Big Duck. She also owned a web company called Advomatic. She sold Advomatic to another company called Four Kitchens. But for Big Duck, especially, and she had only owned Advomatic, she took over ownership of that. She owned it for a few years. It was a different relationship to her. So she started thinking about what could come next for Big Duck. She started talking with Liz and I, and we explored a few options. But almost immediately, it was just clear that employee ownership was the way to go. She certainly could have sold Big Duck to another agency. She could have explored that. We didn't even open that door. We did explore ESOP, the employee stock ownership plan, and worker-owned co-op models. It was clear to us that we were I should say, it was clear to us that we were too small for ESOP. It just didn't make sense for us. And philosophically, the worker-owned co-op model was much more aligned with our culture. So we worked with a company called the ICA Group, who, if anyone is thinking about worker ownership or employee ownership, I would highly recommend. We had a great experience with them. We still actually work with them. And they helped us go through evaluation of the business, helped us think about frameworks. They set up a section of our staff that worked as the sort of committee to help make certain decisions around what was our buy-in amount going to be, how are we going to structure our initial governance chart. And what's interesting as a co-op, which again I think goes ESOP, as far as I understand, again, does a great job of giving employees more access to profit. But with worker-owned co-ops, and I'm not as familiar with the intricacies of that, but as a co-op, ownership of the business is actually shared equally among any employee who chooses to buy in and meets that eligibility process. So basically, instead of one owner that we had for those, from 1994 to 2021, starting in late 2021 to now, as of the latest number, we have 13 owners. And what that means is if we have a profitable year, any eligible profits, and that's a long story about how we figure that out, but any eligible profits are distributed equally. So you could be an owner and have been an owner for a year and been at Big Duck for 3 years, and I'm an owner and I've been at Big Duck for 18 years. We get the same access to profit. The other thing that's really interesting about it is that there's just a greater voice in how we operate. So we have a board. Right now, our board is, we have 14 full-time staff. There are 5 of our staff who are worker owners are on our board. Sarah is on our board for the co-op model is set up through a series of loans. So Sarah, in essence, has sort of made a loan to the company to support that buyout. And for the life of that loan period, she has access to a seat on the board. We have a governance chart that says, what things can I and my other co-director, Claire Taylor Hansen, have access to approving? What things does the board have to approve? What things can managers approve? What things do worker owners need to approve? So it's much more complicated in terms of how we make decisions, but also has allowed us to have a greater level of transparency. So for example, one thing that the board is going to be meeting about shortly is which healthcare plan are we going to offer our team for the year ahead. In fact, we've had conversations with UpSource about these decisions.
Yep.
And in the past,
Unfortunately, healthcare plans have gotten way more expensive.
healthcare plans
Oh my
every year,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
And we, in the past, we might have made that decision. Sarah might have made that on her own or made it with input from members of the leadership team. Now it's a conversation with the board. And in fact, many of our board meetings are also open. So anyone on staff, even not just worker owners, can attend those meetings. So it just means that, we are opening things up in a lot more ways. We still have hierarchy. There still are management structures. But I think this was a natural result of our own journey that the company was on around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think the decision to become a co-op and not pursue a merger or a buyout from another organization really felt in line with our values and who we were and the best part of who we were, and has resulted in, I think, people being more engaged in how we operate, and not just a few of us being deeply engaged, but more of us. And one of the values we updated our values as a co-op. If you go to bigduck.com/about, you can see them. is sort of this idea of me and we. It's not just what's good for me, but also what's good for the collective.
That's amazing. So let me ask what is maybe an obvious question, or maybe not an obvious question, which is when you have that many voices at the table, especially when that is effectively the majority of the people at the company, is it hard to come to consensus on things, or is it just is it not, and that's a reflection of how strong the culture is? What do you find?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had, there are certain decisions that have to go to the entire body of worker owners. For example, if we were ever to change the fundamental audience that we were working with, if we said, you know what, instead of just nonprofits, we're going to also work with restaurants. I'm a big foodie. One of these days, that would be fun to have restaurants as clients. Though another world, another sector that is struggling right now, that would the worker owners would have to approve that. Right now, Big Duck is fully remote. We don't have office space anywhere. If we were ever to sign a 5-year lease for an office space here in New York City or somewhere else, our team's distributed now, though we still have a lot of folks in New York. Worker owners would have to approve that. Anything that we have gone to worker owners with, generally we've had consensus. We get into a little more nuance at the board level, which again is a voted upon body. So worker owners have to people have to nominate and approve who's on the board, and then the board represents the worker owners. We often do get into good conversation and nuance. We use what's called a fist to five model, where you sort of signal your agreement, whether you strongly oppose something, you strongly agree with it, you have some reservations. We use that to generate discussion, and then we have votes. And we need a majority of a vote to approve something, like our budget, for example, another place we've worked with Upsource. We generally, because we're pretty aligned, there are often good tension points in discussion, but we generally get there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, obviously, the organization has been incredibly intentional about the choice to make that switch, how that operating framework has been deployed within the organization, and then how it continues to manifest into the future. I imagine if you weren't that intentional, it could be kind of challenging, but it sounds like you've done.
I mean, I think the co op model requires you to be more intentional, right? You have to really spell out how you're making decisions with that governance chart, which we review every year. So we're very mindful and we refer to it frequently. And I think also as we bring in new staff members with different experiences, we have people now applying to work for Big Duck because we're a co op, not just people who've been here pre and post, and people who are joining us because of that kind of hunger for more of a voice, more of a conversation in how we're making decisions. So it's very much alive.
That's awesome. Farrah, one thing that I've incredibly impressed with is the fact that you've been in business for so long. Agencies, as you know, tend to be really, I don't know, challenging, dynamic is maybe a nice way to put it, but they go through these vicious cycles and ups and downs, and a lot of them are dependent on trends in the industry. But effectively, for most organizations, it comes down to the fact that in a what is predominantly a project-based world, there's a lot of ups and downs with revenue, right? And depending on the concentration of clients, there may be a lot of risk or exposure there. There may be little risk or exposure there. But it's very, very rare that I come across an organization or an agency or a professional service organization of any kind that has been around for over 30 years. So, what do you think is the secret to Big Duck? Why has it been able to sustain over that period of time? And what do you think will be important or needs to be true for it to be around for another 30 years?
Yeah, great question. Let me try and take all of that apart. I mean, I think we are both deep and broad. So you mentioned, we're project based. So we have in our lifespan that I've been here for 18 years, we've had a few retainer projects, but most of our work is project based. That makes sense with our philosophy. Again, we want to teach people how to fish, and then they go and fish. They come back to us when they need a new fish, a new fishing pole. I don't know. I've lost myself in this metaphor quickly. Um, so we don't want people to be dependent on us and feel like they have to work. Now I got to think of something to use this $10,000 a month budget. We're not opposed to figuring that out, but we haven't worked in that way. What that means is there is a constant pressure for us to bring in new projects. I think what has worked for us is we work across sectors. So we work with arts organizations, environmental organizations, international groups, justice groups, health groups, family and community groups, faith-based groups. We don't just work in one sector. I know that I have colleagues who work primarily in higher education right now, and they are going through a lot of challenges, right? Or works just with international. If those organizations are dealing with USAID cuts, they're not able to work in the same way. So we enjoy a diverse group of clients, which I think has helped us. And while we certainly have some contracts that are bigger than others, we haven't had as much of the quote unquote guerrilla client dilemma that I think some other agencies face. I think the other thing is we enjoy a good reputation, and we have a lot of people who come to us because they've seen us speak, because someone referred us to them, because they've read something or listened to our own podcast. For podcast fans, that's the Smart Communications podcast. Uh, and I mean, we've had at least 3 opportunities that came to us through ChatGPT. So somewhere, the internet's sending people our way. Um, so we have a good reputation. We've never done cold calling. We certainly sometimes respond to RFPs that a friend of a friend or someone tags us on LinkedIn. But for the most part, people are coming to us, and we enjoy good relationships where people have a good experience working with us. So they come back. Either they come back in a new organization they work for, or they come back 3 years later when they have a similar or different need and enjoyed working with our team on something else. So I think that it's reputation and relationships. We also, and we could talk more about business development at now or later. My style is, I don't know if have you ever done the DISC profile?
I've never done it, but
That's one of those,
I'm a little bit
workplace
familiar with it.
profile
Yeah.
quizzes. I'm a high I if you ever do it, which is like influencer. Also, like in the Strength Finder, one of my strengths is woo, which is my favorite thing I've ever learned from
Woo.
a work
Yeah.
test. Right? How
There we
fun is
go.
that? I'm a people person, like very naturally, authentically, genuinely. I want to spend time talking to people and understand what's going on for them, build relationships over a cup of coffee or a cocktail, go to their events, learn about what's going on. And other members of our team are like that too. And I think we build relationships in a few different ways. And I think those relationships are sustaining us, and have also come to bat for us at times when needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Given how we started the conversation, which is just the broader market being a little bit more challenged and that you focus a lot of your efforts on biz dev, are you finding that you're having to work harder or find more creative ways to connect with people, or are things still kind of working the way they have? Like, are there any changes that you've had to make in with relation to the broader biz dev effort at Big Duck to keep things moving in the right direction, or have you been fortunate thus far?
I mean, one of the changes we've made also sort of matches the evolution of Big Duck. So when I first joined Big Duck, Sarah was really the only person doing biz dev. And then it became part of my job because naturally it was something that I was doing a little bit of in my previous job. And I had my own relationships I was bringing. I started cultivating clients I was working with as a strategist. And eventually, she and I were doing biz dev together, and we had support from another member of our team. One of the things, especially not just in the spirit of the co op, but in the spirit of, again, trying to become what our own DEI plan calls a leaderful organization, we've been trying to build the skills and experience of more members of our team to think about relationship development and business development. So now more members of our team are surfacing possible projects from existing clients and able to have some of those initial conversations, even with potential clients who might reach out to them directly or might come through. So I think we've got a little bit of a way to go, but we've been able to build some more systems, templates. We have a document that has here are all of our standard scopes. We have pricing document with our standard fees. So people don't just have to come to me all the time and say, hey, Farah, what do I say to this? But now there's more and more tools and documentation to respond to things. So I think that's more about providing support so it becomes a more sustainable function beyond just me or previously beyond Sarah. And I think some of the ways of building relationships with clients, having in person conversations, meeting by Zoom, not just in relationship to the specific deliverable, but generally of what's going on. That's been pretty consistent. Obviously, there was a lot less in person meeting during times when the pandemic was really high. It still is here. Um, so we're seeing back, we also get a lot of opportunities from speaking at conferences. So we enjoy within the nonprofit space, we speak a lot and network a lot at conferences. That has a very long lead time. In other words, we get opportunities and say, "Hi, I saw you speak 6 years ago. I saw someone from Big Duck speak, I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago about this thing, about this." And we're like, oh my gosh. So what's great is that, what's hard about using conferences as a lead generation is it's rare, although last year we did have an opportunity that came from a speaking engagement within a month, which was amazing. Usually it takes a lot longer. But again, it builds that overall reputation. And I think when Big Tech thinks about its audiences, obviously clients and prospects are our audiences, but we do genuinely consider the entire nonprofit sector a very important audience to us. So we generate a fair amount of free content. Every month we produce at least one blog and two podcasts. We also do lots of free and low cost webinars and workshops to, again, support and build the entire field. Sometimes there are people who then eventually call us for a project and sometimes not. But I think because we're seen as a source and a resource, that helps, again, our reputation and helps when potential projects come up.
Yep, totally. And as I'm thinking about this in real time, I think one of the benefits that I'm hearing from you of the co-op model, at least if I have my biz dev hat on, is everyone feels that need to participate and to pitch in. You've shed the what we always think about, like the owner agent problem. Like, okay, well, everyone's an owner now, right? Like, so they are all incented to have that extra conversation or to go speak at that event, even if it's not natural to them. Where in more traditional organizations, someone might say, well, that's somebody else's job and I don't need to do that, right? And I think we know as biz dev people, it's always like, if I can have more of me, that is ideal. It's just not realistic in most organizations. And so having that co-op model creates a lot of extensions or tentacles that are out there in the universe to help broaden the reach, add to the credential that you've created, and hopefully expand the network over time, I guess is probably the best way to put
And I would say, I think we still have a little way to go to cultivate that full quote unquote owner's mindset with everybody on the team. But I think we definitely, if I look back to how Big Tech was 5 or 10 years ago, we've come a long way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, in terms of the future, so we talked how Big Deck started and how it's sustained over time. What does the group or the co-op think about the future? Is this an organization who is very growth focused, as an organization who's, hey, everyone's happy, let's keep everyone happy? Again, this is a little bit of a leading question because I think in a project based world, it's just always really challenging to manage growth. It comes in fits and spurts, and we've, just probably 70-80% of the clients we've worked with have gotten up to 15, 20, 25, 30 people. And then they lose a big client. Now they're back down to, 15 or something. Right. And then they come back and they tell me, well, I never wanted to be that big in the first place. It just happened that way. Right. But you guys have a really strong nucleus of a team of co-owners. I imagine you're probably much more intentional and thoughtful about your growth. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, I mean, I think Big Duck is generally intentional and thoughtful about everything. We are a very deliberative crew. Um, it's interesting. I think growth comes a lot of ways. I think growth comes by, you know, revenue, can come by number of staff, can come by offices if you have in person locations. We, again, are more about how do we grow in a way that makes sense given what our clients need from us, given what we know are our areas of strength and where we can be additive, and in a way that we generally also try to balance having, running a profitable organization that gets good results with our clients while also sustaining the members of our team and not burning them out. So the average work week is pretty much 9 to 5 local time. There are certainly times where you might have to work an evening for a meeting or a presentation. You may have to travel. Most people work 40 hours or less in terms of time tracking. And we very much don't ever want to become currently, who knows what the future holds, but it has been true for at least the 18 years I've been here. We very much want to continue to value and prioritize our staff's wellness and well-being. I will say that in the near future, we will, certainly in the next 12 months, we're going to be kicking off a project we call our co-op philosophy, where we're basically going to be doing a variation of strategic planning and question asking about who are we, what's our relationship to the solidarity economy, which is very much tied into this idea of being more democratic in how we operate, who, what do organizations need from us? Where are we best? And we're going to be charting out the next stage of Big Duck. So I might have another answer to that in 6 to 12 months. For
Okay.
now, I would
We'll
say
have you back then. How about that?
exactly. That sounds good. I mean, in my time that I've been at Big Duck, we've been anywhere from 8 to 21 staff. We are currently 14. We've been around that size for a while. I'd have to go back and look, but I feel like at least 5 to 10 years, we don't currently have aspirations to double. Sure, generating more revenue would be lovely so that we can continue to do what we want to do, operate with a little less pressure, give our team even additional compensation and benefits. All of that would be great, but we don't want to do it at the cost of people's own, like I said, well-being. So growth for us is likely to continue to be very slow and thoughtful. One of my colleagues, Ali Damu, is in a new position we created about 2 years ago called Director of Service Development. And her role is part senior strategist, working with clients, part business development. So she works with me in kind of cultivating opportunities, and part service development. And sometimes that means spinning up a new service or category, or evolving things we're currently doing to be better, stronger, more relevant to what our clients need. And I think that was I'm really glad and proud of us for making that decision to create that role. So again, it's a blend of having a little time to think about evolution of our services and work with our team to determine what those are, to do some business development, and to also still work with clients directly as a day-to-day way to understand what organizations need. And so for us, most recently, that has been really identifying and spinning up training and workshops as its own category. So we used to say we did what we call campaigns, brands, campaigns, and teams. And our teams work was really around building stronger communications teams through assessments and planning. Now we say we do brands and messaging, campaigns and plans, and trainings and workshops. And trainings and workshops has always been things that our team did, but we found that everyone on our team actually really enjoys being in that trainer facilitator space. Clients and organizations generally in the world need that. We enjoy a few relationships with foundations who invest in us to support building the capacity of their grantees. And it's actually been an interesting response for us to AI, right? When we talk about AI, there's a lot of different ways AI is showing up. For us, spinning up trainings and workshops is also an antidote in some ways for those who still want that human interaction, that space that you can't get from just chatting with a robot. So that's been really interesting and part of how we've grown. Again, so it hasn't changed our head count, and it hasn't super dramatically changed our revenue as of yet, but it has made us sort of diversify what we do in a way that has also allowed us to be responsive and build on what the sector needs and what our team is good at.
All right. Well, you brought up AI, so now I have to ask.
Oh, I've opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah, you did. Well, it's already been open, I think. But are clients coming to you today and saying, "What should we do? How do we integrate AI? How should we think about it?" I mean, there's one side of the AI conversation, which is what is Big Duck doing differently, and you're welcome to answer that, or if not, no big deal. But as it relates to the client service, are clients coming to you saying, "What do we need to be doing with AI, and can you teach us?"
Yeah, I may not have satisfactory answers for either of these, but I'm going to go for it.
Well,
So
there's no wrong answer.
there's no wrong answer. That's right. We're all friends here. Clients aren't currently in a deep way coming to us to ask about how do I manage AI. I think because of the work we do, I imagine organizations that are more embedded in digital and tech are getting those questions, or organizations that are maybe managing day-to-day communications for organizations. Again, we're more sort of foundational setting, do big picture campaign work that lasts for years. we're not in the day to day weeds as much. So those questions are coming up a tiny bit, but I would say not in a deep way from clients. Now, for us, I would say we're sort of in the part of the journey with AI where we're in the sort of questioning and experimental phase. We have not deeply embedded it in our work. We have a policy around AI use. We discuss it with our team in periodic meetings. Some of our departments are experimenting it. The most ways that we're basically using it to support our productivity. So, for example, running a document through Grammarly to make sure our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, or using an AI note taker on meetings instead of having someone to have to take that and read the synthesis, but not just go by that as what happened in the meeting. So we're using AI in those ways. We feel strongly about not using AI for creative work. We have an in-house team that is going to be generating that work. It is important for humans to be doing that work. But that's kind of where we are with it so far.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I would say Upsource is very much in the same boat in terms of we are attempting to deploy it in ways which it can be productive to both the individual and the team. A couple interesting areas where we have had some success with it is one of the things we do is a lot of our work is focused on client meetings, as you know. And so we record all those client meetings, and historically we would do that as a way to just have like a better note taker and be able to reflect back on conversations that were had. But B, what we from a management perspective have tried to up the skills of our team members who are delivering that information and having those meetings. And so we actually now feed all of that into AI, and we have this criteria which we've set that we continue to improve over time, which is like the 5 criteria of running an effective meeting. And so we can spit out scores based upon the AI analysis of the video. And it's just a really nice way to, in a scalable, efficient manner, deliver objective feedback in any situation, or at least in the case of if there are extremes. So if there are situations where something went really poorly, but we wouldn't know about it otherwise, the AI could flag that as an example, right? The other way that we've been using it, which has been really helpful, is candidate screening, because and we don't use the AI to screen the candidates, but actually what we're doing is we're gut checking against the repository of previous interviews. And so we're saying like, hey, we have an inclination about someone based upon the first interview or the second interview, but sometimes it's hard in interviews. Some people are just really good at interviewing. Some people have a lot of charisma. Some people don't have a lot of charisma, but they're actually great and they would be great team members, right? And so what we try to do is use the AI to unearth the little tidbits and to help us remain objective and finding talented people. And so we'll compare actually interviews that we've had with interviews of current staff and current staff who've been really successful with us and say, is this person more like this employee or more like that employee? Probably not too much different than you would do with like a disc profile or strength finders, right, in some regard. But we're just using it as a means to say like, okay, would this person really work out, or are they just really good at interviewing and I don't know the difference, right? So those things have been really, really interesting use cases of AI and have been super scalable, which has been nice.
That's interesting. I mean, for us, in order to sort of fight bias, which I hear you sort of offering in that second example, we have multiple people review, we have screeners, rubrics, multiple people in interviews, scoring, discuss those scores. So we've created a human variation of that. We haven't had a hiring process in over a year, and so I don't know if AI will show up differently the next time we do a hire, but I'll certainly pass that tidbit on to Olivia Frere, who is our head of operations, who also works most closely with you all.
No, that's great, and yeah, that'd be great. And we know Olivia well. We're just at a point now where the volume is in such a way that we, in order to not get lost in the sauce, as they say, it's been a nice sidecar to working with us and making sure, to your point, that we're not biased, that we are eyes wide open, and not missing anything. So it's been a useful tool. All right. Well, to be honest, Farah, I don't have any other questions. This has been really great. I think that there are going to be a lot of agencies and agency owners who see this interview and like you said, you guys are extremely intentional, very deliberate. You've put an operating framework effectively into your business that has obviously worked very well because whether it's been for the full 30 years or not, just the fact that you've been around for that long and have continued to sustain says a lot of you and a lot of the organization. And I would guess that there's going to be a lot of people who reach out for additional questions. And in that case, they should just reach out directly to Farah because I can't answer most of these questions. But Farah would definitely be the right contact. So thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we certainly appreciate you guys being a client and wishing you tons of success.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And folks can always learn more about us at bigduck.com. You can reach me at Farra, Farra, at bigduck.com. One of the principles of the co op movement is to support other people exploring this. So, beyond happy to have those conversations, either with myself or other folks on our team. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. You can always also email hello at bigduck.com. One of us will find you.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Farah. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Have a great day.
You too.
Cheers.